the system that has existed since the 1970s does not make any sense anymore, like, at all.
Come on and visit for any occasion. So keep patting out, waiting, comics and conversation. Keep the conversation moving along. Keep reading comics, keep your local store strong. If it's hard, then it's a job for the challengers. Comics and conversation, y'all.
From Challengers Comics and Conversation in Chicago, this is Contest of Challengers. And now, here are Patrick Brower and W. Dal Bush.
I think comic books are one of the greatest things in the world.
Wow, not the way I thought you were going to go. Okay, go on.
I think that the medium is so imaginative, so creative. It has been the main constant in my life since I have memories.
Okay.
Like, obviously you could say I'm jaded, I'm too close to it, I'm too inside of it.
I've said all those things. Go on.
But, like, I have other interests. I love music. I make music. I love pro wrestling. I didn't get into that until I was...
You've made some pro wrestling videos, though.
Well, I made Christmas videos that had wrestling in them. But I never wanted to be a pro wrestler.
Sure.
And I didn't get into wrestling until I was out of college.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't get into making music till much later in life.
Sure.
But I've always been a comics fan and a comics reader and a comics collector to an extent.
Yeah. You still are.
I think comics are just, like I said, one of the best things in the world.
Okay.
I think the comics industry is so stupid.
Yeah, it's been a week of kind of coming to grips with the idea that, oh, this is a fundamentally flawed industry that, honest to God, does not deserve to exist in the shape that it has existed the last couple decades.
I don't even understand how it's existed this long.
Like, I'm sure we're jumping around a little bit from maybe what you wanted to talk about, but seeing that Milton Greep article...
That's exactly where I was going.
On ICV2 yesterday.
So what Dal's referencing is 40 years ago, Capital City Distribution started. And they were the big two. Like when I started comics retail, we were using Friendly Frank's, which was a local distributor. They put our books in long boxes.
Yeah, to dial it back a little further, in the late 1970s and the
First,
early 1980s...
the Earth cooled.
Superman debuted in Action Comics #1. In the late 1970s, early 1980s, that's when direct distribution in comic shops really started. Prior to that, comics retailers were basically just people that were able to get stuff from newsstand distribution, and they'd never know what they were going to get or what was going to come in or what kind of condition it was going to be in. They mostly dealt in, back issues and stuff. They would buy people's collections and resell that stuff, and the new comics were much more difficult for them to get on a reliable basis. So a few different retailers in different parts of the country kind of simultaneously were approaching Marvel and DC to say, look, if we bought from you directly and we didn't return them, which means what you sold to us, you kept all the money, unlike newsstand distribution where a ton of returns could make any title like massively unprofitable and you'd never know it until months later. Give us a better discount than the newsstand guys get, and we will keep everything that we buy. And we will get to pick how many copies we get of things. So a few different distributors kind of started up, and they would then distribute to comic shops, and that's how direct distribution started. It was directly from the publisher to the distributor to the stores. Those distributors kind of proliferated throughout the 1980s until you really had two major ones going into the 1990s, which was Capital City, which is the Milton Greep one, and then Diamond, which is still around. Obviously, since then, every small distributor got gobbled up or put out of business, and then all of the Heroes World, Marvel, Diamond, DC, the distribution war stuff shook everything out to basically making Diamond the only remaining comics distributor. And as we talked about last episode, they are the exclusive distributor for single-issue comics for all of the major publishers.
I didn't realize we were going to be this deep into the distribution channels. But...
I just wanted to set this down.
No, that's great. But there's a really good book out that you're actually in, Dan Gennaro's book.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember what it's called. Comic Shop. I don't know. Anyway, I would have had my copy in front of me had I been been more on the ball.
I don't think I have a copy of that.
But it's a book all about how the distribution channel started, and then it goes into stores today. And cool. Dow was interviewed. Challengers is one of the few stores mentioned in it that has a section. Dow was the interviewee for that one.
Yeah. So anyway, Milton Griep, who still runs ICV2, which is when Capital City was a distribution channel, they would have an internal magazine that they would release called...
Advanced Comics was the magazine.
Advanced Comics was the catalog, but Internal Correspondence, I believe, was the name of the magazine, and now they have
It was their news magazine.
Yeah, it was basically the Diamond has a similar one called, I think, Diamond Dateline, or something like that, Diamond Dialogue, and that's a lot of information that Diamond would make available to comic shops. Capital City had their version, which was Internal Correspondence, and that'd be where, pre-internet days, that would be a lot of information that stores would get concerning specifically the business end of comics distribution and retail. So stuff that wouldn't necessarily be in the catalog, like solicitations or new series, but it would be things where if different executives were in charge of different things at Diamond.
Editorial shakeups in the industry.
Yeah, basically, it's all the business end of things, so terms changes and things like that. The website that Milton Griep has now is called ICV2, which is Internal Correspondence
Volume 2,
Dose. Or version 2. So you can go to icv2.com and see this. But like Patrick was saying, it's 40 years since Capital City started, Milton Griep's co-owned distribution company. And to kind of spotlight how things have changed and yet some things haven't changed, he had some photos that were amazing. And it was basically the order sheet for a shop in 1981.
Yeah, somewhere in Michigan.
Yeah.
I think it was Collector's Corner?
Something, maybe. But what was amazing about it was all of the Marvel and DC books for, the month of October 1981, everything that Marvel and DC published fit on one side of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper.
All of every title.
Yeah.
Broken down by company by week.
Yes.
So it would say Marvel Comics, week 1 for October, week 2. And it didn't have synopses, but it would say, Avengers 251, parentheses, Steve Englehart, John Buscema, parentheses. Would tell you who was in it as to the best of their ability.
Yeah.
And then it did the Marvel ones by week, and then the DC ones, and then also Warren on the front of that as well.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I was pulling this up, so I don't know if you mentioned this. No solicitation information. Just a couple creators, and even then, it was maybe that'll be who's doing it, but no one had any idea. Marvel and DC could change that stuff. There were no, nowadays there are terms of sale where if Marvel or DC changes the interior contents of the book beyond what's advertised, they have to tell us so we can adjust our numbers, or it's returnable. Back then, you'd order a bunch of copies of an issue of X-Men, and then suddenly it's John Byrne didn't draw this issue. This was somebody else, and now maybe all your John Byrne guys aren't going to care.
It was definitely Dave Cockrum at that time.
Yeah.
On X-Men.
So, yeah, looking at... I wanted to pull up this image. So, in an average week, Marvel published 8 comics.
You mean 8 variant covers, right?
Yeah.
Per book?
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff where there's magazines in here, like Crazy and Savage Sword. I love that there's one that's just Marvel Graphic Novel #1.
That's what it was. It was a series.
Yeah.
Marvel Graphic #1, by the way, New Mutants.
Yeah, 100 copies is what this place wanted. And looking at these quantities, it's insane because it's... I know that the comics cost more now. Milton Griep makes a point in here of, Marvel books were 60 cents back then, which with inflation would make them $1.88 today. So maybe...
And that's what they cost. So he was right.
So maybe there's a sense of if comics cost half as much, maybe we'd be selling more. But for one thing, I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't know that our sales would jump by double if they cost half as much. Almost every time there's been a lower price comic, we don't sell substantially more.
No.
We did not sell, to my knowledge, what did it work out to? 16 times as many copies of a 25-cent comic as we would a $4 comic.
Correct.
We sold more, but not nearly enough to make up for the price difference of what we could have sold it for if it were $4. So yeah, the numbers on this are amazing. And at first I'm like, Jesus Christ, this store was getting, 100 copies of Dennis the Menace. And 100 copies of Avengers 216, 200 copies of Miller Jansen Daredevil.
Oh, what number?
It's 179.
Oh, man.
Is that a good one, Patrick?
Oh.
200 copies of Teen Titans, I think, was the high-end one. I had it.
Yeah, back then Teen Titans was DC's X-Men.
It was. Yeah, there we go. Teen Titans 16, 200 copies. X-Men was the same 200 copies. That was the high water mark. 200 copies of Dazzler, though. Dazzler number 12, 200 copies.
200 copies of Dazzler number 12.
And I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, like, can you imagine if the numbers were like that now? And is it because they weren't producing a ton of stuff? Which, yes, some of it, like, people could be Marvel zombies then because you were only committing to maybe 8 or 10 comics a week. Like, we get people who, on average, get 8 to 10 comics a week. That's not a big deal. So you'd have people that are just like, give me every Marvel book because you knew it was never going to be more than, like, 10 or 12 comics a week at the most. And some weeks less than that. So it was easy to just go in for literally every Marvel comic. You could never do that now. We don't have anyone who gets every Marvel comic.
I mean, you can't, nor should you.
Right. And that's, I mean, that's the thing about kind of oversaturation and how many more comics. Like nowadays, you know, back then there was the one X-Men comic. Like X-Men 154. That's it. That's the X-Men comic book for the month.
Well,
they weren't even calling it Uncanny then because that didn't mean anything. It was the only X-Men comic.
There were 2 Spider-Man books, though. There was Peter Parker and Amazing.
That's true. But, I mean, that's the exception. Like, everything else, there's one Avengers comic, one X-Men comic. You have stuff like Detective and Batman, but, I mean, that'd been going on for,
right,
by this point, 40 years.
Same thing with Superman in Action.
So, you don't have that dilution. You don't have that, you know, there's 8 or 10 or whatever Spider-Man books for the month. There's just the 2. So everybody just bought those 2. So all of the numbers were substantially higher because you weren't spreading it out. The thing, though, that really struck me with this, and the thing that made me think, oh, our industry is irrevocably broken and should absolutely be destroyed and something new built in its place that reflects the modern landscape. Because I'm looking at this and I'm like, Jesus Christ, what the hell? How are you selling 150 copies of Kazar in a month? And then I realized, oh, you're not. Because there are no graphic novels, there is no digital. You're ordering 150 copies of Kazar because that has to last you not 4 weeks, but the entire lifespan of your store. What happens if someone comes in 2 years and needs that copy of Kazar? You can't give it to them any other way. You have to have bought it when it came out and just sold it nonstop. The lifespan of these individual issues was back then decades.
I don't know if you were ordering for a store at this point, but when I started ordering for the store we worked at back in the day, and for years, we were ordering shelf copies and put-away copies.
Yeah.
Copies that went into storage to be brought out later for back issues.
Yeah.
We were literally ordering back issue copies.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you were just talking about.
When I started working...
It was a big deal when we stopped. Like, oh man, we need to stop doing this.
Sure. Because, so, I mean, we'll talk about this in length, I'm sure now. When I started working at Graham Crackers in Naperville on, I think, Sundays or something, after, you know, just doing, taping up books and whatever, making 50 count and 100 count backer board assortments, doing the shrink wrap on them, using the heat gun. There were long boxes in the upstairs back room of just, like, X-Men #1.
Yeah.
Like, multiple long boxes of just the 5 different covers of X-Men #1 because you're going to be able to sell that back issue in all the different covers. At the time, the thought was forever. Because you're always going to have someone coming in who's brand new to the X-Men and needs to collect the issues. So you're going to need that X-Men comic book for them forever.
Do you remember stocking up for sales?
Yeah, you'd have these extra copies. So suddenly it would be like, oh, if you're going to be filing stuff, now for sales you need 4 copies of every X-Men in the back issue. Because that's the stuff that people are going to hit. 3 copies of every Spider-Man.
I specifically remember doing this with Chris Carlson. I don't know if, I assume you and I had to do it multiple times.
Probably.
I would be in that upstairs area on the phone saying, all right, Amazing 478. Do we need it? 470, like whatever. I'm reading off what is in inventory, and Chris was going through our back issues in that store saying yes or no.
And stores had other ways of getting books at the time. You could buy collections, but that was probably going to be A, more expensive, and B, less reliable than just buying a ton of extra copies from the start. When you know, if it's a 60-cent cover price comic and you're getting 45 to 50% off, you might as well just get another 20 or 30 copies that you can just put in the back issues for $1 in a month or two.
Yeah.
And then, like, you're making more money that way. Why would you not stock up? So, you know, you see these numbers on these order sheets, and it's like, well, I don't think anyone was selling 200 copies of Dazzler in a month. Some stores, honestly, probably were selling close to that, where you'd have, you know, those hardcore fans and the kids coming in and whatever else, and there were only so many books to buy. Like, the extra order sheets in this ICV2 article are fascinating because the only stuff that you would line item order, like that issue of Daredevil, you'd put in a number. The non-Marvel DC stuff, you just had standing orders. You just said, this many copies of Archie.
Every month.
Every month, whatever Archie comes out, or whatever frequency Archie comes out at, give me this many copies of the new issue. Because it didn't matter, because the sales weren't going to fluctuate. And if they did, like, nowadays we get hyper-specific with how our numbers are fluctuating, even by a copy or two, because we know that after 3 or 4 weeks, whatever we're stuck with basically just eats into our profit. Back then, most stores didn't even track their sales because what was the point? You just throw them in the back issues, they're eventually going to sell. So many stores didn't even do, like, handwritten cycle sheets where they could go, okay, I ordered 50 copies of X-Men. Over the first week I sold 25, the next week I sold 8, the next week I sold 4. And, that number then becomes, well, what do I think I'm going to sell in the back issues to add on to that? And then when is it just going to be lost money? Most stores didn't. They just plugged in a number. They just looked at, maybe they looked at what they ordered last month and said, okay, I want more than I got last month because I had people looking for it, or I don't want as many because I think I got too many. But everything would just be gut feeling. There wasn't a sense of, like, data, let alone, like, point of sale systems that had hardcore analysis of what was going to subscribers and what was selling off the shelf and what week and how many each week to each section and whatever. Like, and
it just brings me back to
and there was nothing to reorder either.
The graph paper we would use with big boxes.
Circle it at the end because that's the number sold.
Number in the middle is what you ordered. Each corner was
a week.
Uh-huh. And then the circle for the end.
Yep.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And that was only once you hit the 1990s where you suddenly have a larger catalog each month to order from. And there were these sort of fluctuations of, who's the creative team and are things going up or down? Because even by that point, the expansion in the 90s led to so many more back issues that people had to carry. So you couldn't just throw everything in the back issues because you started to have this thing of like, oh, no one's going to be looking for like that Spider-Man miniseries because it's just a random Spider-Man miniseries. No one cared about it. It didn't have anything happen in it. It was just a 4-issue Spider-Man miniseries that Marvel made because you could just keep making Spider-Man miniseries and they'd keep selling. But they didn't have any long-term sales potential. And then you start to hit the 2000s where you've got way more graphic novels, and then the 2010s where you suddenly got digital, and now the back issue market basically doesn't exist. There aren't a lot of people looking for so many back issues. There's people looking for some stuff, but the amount
of... mainly keys.
Yeah, the wheat to chaff ratio is way off. Like most of the stuff that comes out in a given month from previews, no one's going to be looking for a month after it comes out. People will buy it because they want to read it that month or because they think it'll be valuable that day. But no one's going to be looking for that older issue in a month or 2 months or 3 months or a year or whatever. And storing all these back issues becomes unreasonable. Like the amount of space they're taking up. I remember being at a panel at a retailer conference 15 years ago. And the panelist had said, show of hands, who here has more than half their floor space given over to back issues? Ton of hands go up. Most of the hands in the room. Okay, hands up everyone here whose back issue sales are more than half of their sales. Very few hands go up. And the person on the panel is like, that's a problem. Like
they take up so much space.
So much space and they make so little money, but everyone thinks they have to have all these options for all these theoretical customers who are going to come in and eat all these things. And it's like, you don't. most of these books don't matter. Like, key issues, sure. Board books, yeah, that's where your money is. But, a random, Gordon of Gotham issue doesn't matter. No one's going to go looking for it ever. They're just not. So, a market now that is completely built around that idea of the single-issue comic that has such an infinitesimally small lifespan is fundamentally broken and maybe shouldn't exist anymore. Like, single-issue comics maybe don't make any sense in print anymore. They just don't.
Still love them, though.
I do. I mean, I like the individual unit of it, and we certainly, get behind it. But, man, this goes back to what we were talking about in previous episodes, where it's like, maybe it's time for it to go away. Maybe it doesn't make any sense anymore. Maybe a distribution model that's built on no returnability doesn't make any sense, because the whole point of the no returnability back then was you have forever to sell it. That's not how single issue comics work anymore. We'll take a risk on a lot of graphic novels, because if they don't sell the first week, and a lot of them don't, they'll go on the bookshelves, and most of them will sell at some point over a year. If they don't sell at all over a year, we'll remainder them, and we'll probably get our money back that way.
Oh, man, that reminds me. Like a week ago, Chris Burnham asked me to name some graphic novels that we have that we can just never sell. Mm-hmm. And he was going to do a thing on Twitter about them.
Okay.
And I never got to them because I hadn't been in the store.
Oops.
And off the top of my head, I can't think of what doesn't sell because they don't sell. So I'm not constantly seeing them.
I can show you how to generate that list from RMS. I've had to do it before.
Sure. I want to back up just to cover a few points.
Sure.
That order form from October of 81, mm-hmm. I bought every single Marvel book on that list. Not counting, like, Crazy Magazine.
So the comic books.
Well, also Savage Sword.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that Marvel graphic novel?
Oh, yeah.
It was $5, though, Patrick.
Yeah.
That's almost 10 times as much as a Marvel comic was back then.
All of the Marvel graphic novels.
So let me do that math in my head real quick.
Super Boxers. What was that one called? The Ron Wilson boxing one. Oh, man.
Oof, I don't know that one. So what is the math on that? That's... That New Mutants graphic novel at $5, when the normal comics price was 60 cents, would be the equivalent of like a graphic novel being $28 now.
Okay.
Like, that would be the difference of like a $4 comic off the rack or a $28 graphic novel.
Do you mean in actual inflation or comic book inflation?
In right now, how much a comic costs,
okay,
and the multiplier of what it was back then. Like, that was like 7 times more expensive.
Yeah. Not only did we buy that book, but...
Actually, it's like 8 times, so even more.
I
$32.
Had to pretend it was George's Christmas present in order to buy it. Like, that was the... Like, my mom would only let me buy it if I was giving it to George.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, by Christmas, he and I both read it multiple times.
Sure, Bob McCloud. What's wrong with that?
But I had to wrap it back up.
That's very cool. Yeah. That's a good scheme. I think it's why it works out that both of you read comics.
Yeah.
So you could pull that sort of scheme.
And also, I couldn't remember the name of that book.
Mm-hmm.
The book by Dan Girino, or Girino. I said it was called Comic Shop something. It's just Comic Shop.
Okay.
Comic Shop, the retail mavericks who gave us a new geek culture.
Ooh, Mavericks.
And Challengers is pictured on page 169. Our interview starts on 168. And I say our, but it was with Dow. And it goes to, it's like 3 pages.
That's cool.
Boy, that was hard to give all those numbers. I'm not wearing my glasses.
You figured it out. You could have just made up the numbers. No one has it in front of him, probably.
Frank has it in front of him right now, I guarantee you.
I think I signed a copy for Michael as well.
Okay.
I think I did.
It's a good book. The history of the direct market is fascinating, and for years I've been trying to get Frank Davis to do a book about Chicago retail.
Sure.
I mean,
that'd be interesting.
Just because I want to read it. I don't want to research it.
No.
Like, you and I did that one day years ago, phone call of
who's the oldest operating comic shop in Chicago.
To Gem and to Carl Bonacera from All American.
Yeah.
So I mean, like that kind of stuff is fascinating to me.
Sure.
This book is a great read for the birth of the direct market, but what a niche readership.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's people who work in the industry are always going to be interested in the history of the industry.
Like me!
But then there's people who are just outside of it, who are just fascinated by how bonkers it is.
Yeah.
Because it is. It's the fact that this industry has existed for over 40 years now. The direct retail, hobbyist comic shop is amazing. But it's also, it's built for a different era, and there's been a number of alterations to it, and those have all made it, more stable than it probably should have been. Like, this is an industry that needs a top-to-bottom complete re-envisioning of how product is released and how it's purchased by retailers and how it's then sold to consumers. Like, this, again, just the whole idea of, a 40 to 60% discount to buy things non-returnable that have a shelf life of anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks is ridiculous. Like, it's impossible to get the numbers right. And that makes so many stores way less profitable than they should be. And it makes them far more precarious to keep running. So, I just in general, like, I don't know if the answer is, lower discount and returnability or higher discount and no returnability, but the system that has existed since the 1970s does not make any sense anymore, like, at all.
One of the things that really struck me about looking at the way Capital City did things back in 80 and 81 is that's how we still do it.
Yeah.
It's not numbers on paper anymore, but it's basically numbers on paper.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like final order cutoff where you have, 3 weeks before the book comes out to adjust your numbers. But, I mean, again, the thing of it is, back then it didn't matter as much. Like, now, if we can adjust our numbers, great. That's 2 less copies I'm going to have to, blow out for 99 cents because no one cares about them. And that means that the 4 copies I did sell might actually be profit. Back then it was like, well, you're getting 40 or 50 copies. If you've got 2 or 3 extra, they'll just sell for another month. Like, you would never not need copies of a Marvel or DC back issue. Like, on the rare occasion something got canceled, and it seemed like almost nothing did back then. Maybe then, but even then, like, you never know when it's going to come back. I'm sure there's plenty of stores. This guy, whose order form we were looking at, the lowest Marvel comic that was a normal comic-sized Marvel comic that was not a reprint that he ordered for the month was Ghost Rider at 50 copies.
50 copies for Ghost Rider.
And even then it's like, well, Ghost Rider clearly was selling half as well for him as any other Marvel book was at the time. But then you think about it and it's like, well, once you hit the late 80s, Ghost Rider's back, no pun intended, with a vengeance. And suddenly all those old Ghost Rider issues are selling to fans that are just getting into it.
Yeah, I guarantee you that there's those books, that October 81 issue commands more on a back issue market than that Dazzler does.
For sure. And so you'd have these things where even if it wasn't selling right now, sooner or later something would probably happen and make it successful. Or you would just get these weird Marvel collectors who are like, I have everything but Ghost Rider. I'm just going to buy Ghost Rider back issues now.
That wasn't the Dazzler where she fought Rogue, was it? In prison?
I mean...
No, that was later in the series.
Well, for one thing, they couldn't even know back then.
Right. You didn't know that when you ordered it. But
that guy's ordering 200 copies of Dazzler because he thinks he can sell 200 copies of Dazzler.
Remember when Paul Chadwick drew Dazzler at the end of its life? That photo cover?
So, yeah, just fascinating to see what the market was like 40 years ago. And when you see the kind of the foundation of it, it's like, oh, why is it still that way now? Like, that business model fundamentally doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. And I don't know what you replace it with, but you need to replace it with something because the way of doing it, just stop doing it that way.
We don't have the internal knowledge of other industries to be able to see how different, like, car sales are now versus 40 years ago.
You're right.
But I'm sure that there's plenty of people within industries like that or the regular book trade that can point to the flaws in the system. But I think they've also all had major renovations to the way their businesses are run versus how we did.
Again, like you said, the ordering of comics has not fundamentally changed when you think about it. Like, there's been no evolution in it of how...
No, it's just technology-based is all.
Yeah, I mean, we type in numbers to a program that uploads that order to Diamond, who blah, blah, blah. But, like, you're just saying, I want this many copies of Batman, and then in a month they send you that many copies of Batman. And, again, you get a similar discount to what people were getting back then, and then you also don't get to send any of them back.
I'm sorry.
You look to a random page?
I just opened this particular book, because I'm holding... I don't know if you caught it before, listener, but I left the recording studio to go grab my copy of Comic Shop to be able to say exactly what the title was and who wrote it. And you'd mentioned you signed someone's copy.
Did I sign yours?
You signed mine.
Oh, what I write?
My book is signed. First it says, please don't resell this book, Dow.
Aw.
And then I signed it as well.
Yeah.
Lucy Knisley mentions me. I signed my own book. Ah, jeez. I need to, the next time there's a big retailer convention, I'm going to bring this and... Oh, but my bookmark is in it. Oh, it's a curse words bookmark. Look at that.
Oh.
I want to bring the CBLDF selling comics book and get all of our retail friends to autograph my copy.
That sounds good.
That is a book that I'm sure we talked about before, where Dow and I were invited to write a small chapter on branding for selling comics, and it's basically the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund and Dark Horse, under the guidance of Alex Cox, put together a book on how to run a comic shop. Yeah. And each chapter was done by a different retailer, and we were honored to be one of the people picked, also for branding, which is a thing that we like to think we're okay at.
True. And
so this comic shop book that we're in, My Comic Shop Country, which is in wide release now. The first interview of the filming process was done at Challengers at C2E2 2 years ago. I'm in the movie at different points just for a few minutes, but again, it's made up with conversations with retailers. And that's one of the things that I'm actually stupidly proud of about Challengers is that people come to us for that type of advice or for that type of interviews and things.
Sure.
And just this week, even though everyone's in lockdown, everyone's staying in at home, we were approached to do a video interview recommending graphic novels for a group of librarians. And our good friend Amy Wright was the person who came to us, and she's somebody we only know through comic books, and she's a librarian in Canada.
Yeah, she's a Canadian. We don't hold that against her.
And if anything, that's way better for her. Did you know that oh man, this is way off topic. People in Canada spent a few minutes filling out their stimulus forms for their COVID response and started getting checks a few days later.
Sounds like a pretty good country.
Yeah, right? So
How are they going to use it to pay all their medical bills, though? Oh, wait.
I was on a panel a couple years ago at C2E2 that Amy was the moderator for, and it was about graphic novels, and I was with Gina Gagliano and not Jerry Dugan, but briefly Jerry Dugan, which was a fun story of me impersonating Jerry Dugan. But yeah, and Amy's like, hey, we want to do like a 15 or 20 minute thing that Dal said, I hope you realize you need to double that length.
Yeah. If Patrick and I are both going to be in something, take the amount of time that you're telling us and then double it, because we will just go and go and go. And we did.
The official video that went out was like 36 minutes, but we had a good, like she'd blocked 45 minutes. I guess you got to like I don't use Zoom.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I use Zoom when people are interviewing me, but I've never.
But you've not set up anything.
Yeah, like you got to schedule a block of time.
Okay.
So she took 45 minutes on your device, and we really pushed it with chatting with her ahead of time.
Sure.
But it means a lot to me that people value our experience and our, dare I say, expertise.
You can dare to say it. I would not.
To come to us to ask us to do things like this. And it really makes me feel like maybe we kind of know what we're doing.
Yeah, it's definitely a very humbling and gratifying thing to have happen. It's been an interesting few weeks of that sort of thing where, we talked about previously how much we're hustling right now to sell books. The whole, being in a place and then people come to it and buy stuff is not really a thing that anyone can do right now or wants to do. So we're having to find ways to get books to people to help them out via email and then delivery or shipping or drop off at the Chicago Board Game Cafe. And that to me is that's just my job right now. Like, that's not anything that is, extra or laudable. It's just doing my job. So when people say nice things about it, it's like, I don't get a swelled head about it, but there's a moment of like, oh wow, people actually appreciate this. Like,
yeah.
I wouldn't say they should appreciate it, but I like that they do. That's nice.
We got a really nice email and an order from somebody who has never actually been a Challenger's customer, but knows us both from the past, and just talked about their experiences dealing with us way back in the day. I mean, in the 90s. Like, up until 99, I think.
Wow.
And it's neat to know that 20 years later, you still had an impact on someone's life.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
While this current setup is so much more work, and especially for Dal, because Dal is doing 90% of the work for reasons we're not going to get into. But Dal is doing 90% of the work at the store.
The important thing is that if anything goes wrong, that's the 10% Patrick was working on.
Yeah, of course. Of course. And there's, for the first week, we split it up. And then after that, it was all Dal.
Well,
now it's even to a point where I don't even know what your system is. If I were to jump back in, I'd be like, I don't know what you're doing.
I would have to bring you up to speed. The good news is, and I don't want to segue or anything or digress. The good news is, and I guess good news is maybe in quotes, it's a lot less work now. The first week that we were doing this, new books had come out.
Yeah.
Nobody was really prepared for the shutdown, so a lot of people didn't have their books, didn't have anything to do. And so there's a lot of desperation of I want to make sure I'm paying for my stuff. I want to make sure I'm getting the things that I need. I want to make sure that and people had said this and we do appreciate it. They wanted to make sure that we were taken care of, that the money that we were expecting to come in from them was coming in. So there was a lot of stuff the first week of drop-offs and shipping and delivery. And then the second week, it was a bunch of delivery, more than maybe we'd expected, but there was less shipping and less, more reasonable amount of drop-offs at the Chicago Board Game Cafe. And then this week, I mean, we're looking at it and it's there's maybe 2 deliveries maybe so far. I mean, that could change in the next couple days.
Sure.
But, this past week, I think we had 6. The first week was 20 something. The second week was another 20. Third week was 6. And that's going to happen because there's no new books now. So the people who needed their new stuff got it. And the people who haven't asked for anything will just come back into the store whenever that happens, a few weeks or a month or whatever. So yeah, it's a lot less work for me to do now. So much so that most days, if I go in, it's only for a couple hours. I'll make a list of what needs to be done, and then I'll go in and I'll send invoices and double check stuff and pack things up and get stuff ready that's been paid for, and then drop it off at the Chicago Board Game Cafe or at USPS, and then that's kind of it.
I was a little bit gratified, and I don't know if that's the right word, but all along I've been saying this is 4 times more work to sell somebody a book than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And in his latest Tilting at Windmills column, Brian Hibbs used the same.
Yeah.
He said it was 4 times as much work to make a quarter of the money.
Yeah. And that number kind of matches ours in the sense of it doesn't. So I mentioned before that I don't feel like I'm going into the store and spending that much time there, and that's true, but it's kind of every hour of the day something's happening, though. We're fielding emails and checking up on stuff and doing these little tasks kind of continuously.
Last Wednesday morning at 1:30 a.m., within a minute, 3 separate orders came in from 3 different people.
Yes.
1:30 a.m. Wednesday morning.
That was funny.
Yeah, I mean, I was up and on my phone at that time, so I get those. I'm like,
People are in
wow.
weird schedules.
I'm like, oh, that's weird that Ryan's looking for these things now. Oh, and this person. Geez. But I mean, we're grateful for it, and.
Right. But the number that Hibbs quoted is pretty accurate. Like, if we are doing 4 times as much work, our numbers for the week now are like basically a quarter of what they would normally be. Now, that said, there are no new books, so we didn't have to pay a Diamond invoice.
Well,
we didn't have to pay for new Diamond books.
They haven't invoiced us yet for any of the multiple reorders we've done. Somebody, and I haven't told you this, but it hasn't been confirmed. Somebody said that Diamond is no longer shipping reorders. I don't know if that's true or not.
I mean, I hope it's not true, because we do have an order that was placed that we told people was coming in because it got confirmed, and the shipping information was posted
generated
to us, but at the same time it's still listing as just sitting at the warehouse. So basically Monday, if it hasn't moved yet, I'm probably going to email somebody at Diamond and be like, is that stuff coming in? I got people asking.
Well, good luck emailing, because I emailed our credit rep right when this all happened with some questions, and
I'm not emailing our credit rep, Patrick. They don't ever want to talk.
Yeah, that's true. No, they do. When you owe them money, they do. We talked a few weeks ago about issues we were having with gift cards and how we switched over to a new gift card provider.
Yeah.
And one of the things with this, with how we do it now, is we don't get notified when gift cards are bought, where we used to get an individual. We wouldn't get a notification, but we get a bank notification.
Okay.
We don't get that now.
No.
So every couple of days now, I'll just check in, and there have been people like Steve David who have been buying a gift card every week.
Oh, neat.
As a way to just keep,
well, that's nice.
like, I assume that's he's allotting what he'd be spending per week anyway.
Okay.
And there's Heidi also has bought multiple gift cards.
Neat.
And then placed an order, to which I texted her and said, why didn't you use your gift card? She's like, no, I'm saving that.
Okay.
So
I think because the invoice is generated from the same company that did the gift card, so you should be able to use the gift card.
Oh, no, you can.
Okay.
She just chose not to.
I was thinking about that when she'd done it, because I'm like, oh, I guess you could do that now. Because previously, if somebody had wanted to pay for an invoice with the other gift card company, like you couldn't do that. They're two different programs.
But now you can, since it's the same. Yeah. God, I can't believe it took us that long to switch, and I can't believe how much money we were throwing away.
Yep.
Previously,
I did not understand a lot of the economics behind our gift card program, and when I did, I definitely wanted to change.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to look at that link I sent up to Pirate Ship?
I looked at it a little bit, but I'd have to spend more time with it.
It's my understanding is it is as good as stamps for pricing, no monthly fee.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at it.
Yeah, that came from Liana Kangas in her research for the website she's working with a bunch of creators on called 28 Pages Later.
Okay, cool.
Which is all resources for shops.
Neat.
They're doing a lot of work. Leah Williams is behind it, I believe.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, stuff like that. So that's the thing to look forward to. We got a weird little comics industry scare earlier today because a publisher publicly said Diamond told them they are not shipping any new books until August. So they've basically decided to pull all their books and they're just selling direct to retailers. They're not doing anything through Diamond anymore.
Sure.
But immediately I said it to you, but I said this has not been confirmed because if no new comics were coming out until August, that changes the landscape for everybody.
Yeah.
Did you get a minor note of panic when that happened or not?
I mean, a little bit. Like, at this point, I'm just interested in getting our doors open.
Yeah.
Like, being able to have people walk in and buy a book and walk out with it will solve a lot of our short-term problems.
Yeah.
So the no new books thing is, that's, I mean, if there were no new comics coming out for at least 4 months, that's difficult. Yeah, that would definitely change some of our short-term planning.
Yeah. And our long-term planning.
Yeah. But you smartly pointed out that...
Well, after doing a little bit more research, because a different publisher, who's also a retailer, posted another thing saying, hey, we've been told that the May catalog is now the June catalog.
Right.
So the May catalog, it hasn't even come out yet. we're working on the April catalog,
Yeah.
which is now the May catalog.
Um,
Well, it's not due until May, is what I mean.
I thought I'd have to reread the thing you sent, but I thought what they were saying was the catalog we're ordering now, which is April for June,
Yeah.
like the April 20 codes, now all become June 20 codes, which means the catalog that we have right now is officially product that is going to be coming out in August.
Yes.
So the stuff that we've already ordered for April and May becomes product that we'll now be getting in June and July.
So basically, Diamond took a month, like took the
2 months,
yeah,
and then shifted everything down.
Yeah.
So while nothing is going to be coming out in April and May, Diamond's current plan, and that's a real thing I want to emphasize, this is a moving target, so that could all change, is that the new comics will probably start coming out from the catalog of stuff that was supposed to be shipping in April. That product will not start coming out until June. Now, that said, there is already at least 1 week's worth of product in the pipeline somewhere.
right.
So that stuff could come out, and then there might be a gap before other product comes out as the whole machinery of the industry gets up and running. And I mean that literally and figuratively.
Because there's too many balls in play. There's too many, like, when will printers be back open? When will creators be back to creating?
What does shipping look like? That's the other problem with a
Yeah.
lot of this stuff, is that you physically have huge, heavy things that have to move from one place to another. And if there is not enough manpower in freight shipping to make that viable, then it doesn't matter what you can print and what stores want, because you can't move it from one place to another.
Yeah.
So, again, these are all things... This is so much about this whole situation, as many, many people have pointed out, is totally unprecedented. We don't have plans and procedures in place for this because we've never had to do this as a country. Ever.
Nope.
Let alone... I mean, and I say country, but worldwide. So many countries are under the same sort of restrictions, and we're all trying to figure this out. So when things restart, restarting it is way more difficult than shutting it down. Shutting it down, by comparison, is relatively easy. Everyone just stops what they're doing. But starting it up means basically rebuilding, like, not even rebuilding, building an industry from scratch. Every part of it has to be operable, and then it can all work. If one part of it isn't, then it doesn't, none of it matters. None of it works.
And I'll be honest, on a local level, if Chicago opens back up on May 1st, like it's said it's going to, or even whenever it does open up,
Yeah.
I'm still going to be a little bit worried about people who come into the store. Like we were talking about, still wearing masks.
Yeah.
While we're open, just because we need to protect ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. Until there's a vaccine, you have to treat it like the virus is still an active problem. Like, it's not something that, people who think like, oh, we've done our social distancing, now we can go back to normal. Like, no, the social distancing has to keep happening until there's a vaccine.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. That's what we're doing. So people who think like, well, we shut everything down, so, in August everything will be back to normal. It's not. It's definitely not. It just might not be as bad as it is right now in the sense of everything has to be closed and everyone has to stay at home. Like, I think inevitably we will have to be allowed to leave our homes and reopen our businesses. Like, the alternative is
mass suicide.
Is don't have a country,
mass
basically.
murder.
Like, there's no way
all
this
roommates
works.
are killed.
All roommates? Like murder-suicide, or like just murder?
However you feel.
Or workshop it.
You have a roommate. You figured out for your own.
Or workshop it. So yeah, I expect our doors to be open at some point. And even when we were like the week before the state said everybody shut down, I didn't feel like we were that dangerous of a business because we don't have that many people in our store at one time.
Yeah.
Even the busiest days maybe have a dozen people in the store. It's not like, it's wall-to-wall folks. And we might have to do a limit of, hey, we don't want more than like 8 people in the store. So if we got 8 people in the store, everybody waits outside in a line until somebody leaves. Like, that may be what we have to do on certain days.
Today I had to go to a glasses store, and it was... So basically most places I would go, like Warby Parker, closed.
Yeah.
America's Best Eyeglasses, closed. Target Optical, closed. VisionWorks had been closed, just reopened, but only for emergencies. Technically, mine counted as an emergency, and I'd set up an appointment online. They called me this morning and said, "We have too many appointments around the same time. Can we push you back to later in the day?" So I went in later in the day, and I was the only person. They had a doctor, an assistant, and a clerk, and me in the whole place for an hour.
That's
like
great.
They're blocking out an hour per. And I just
Private shopping experience.
I can't figure out how that is worth their time financially. I mean, I can when you look at their glasses prices.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's clearly a skeleton crew. Like I gotta imagine they'd have more people working normally. And on top of that, as you are always fond of pointing out, like when you're closed, you make $0.
Yeah.
If you're open, you at least make more than $0.
I like that some of my catchphrases are coming back to light. I like that. I had an idea for a thing to do when we reopen, but I immediately found the flaw in it. But I'm going to tell it to you now to see what you think.
Okay.
I was thinking of an art show where we get non-actual comic creators, just comic fans,
Sure.
to do each to do a piece, a superhero or a comic book themed piece, and then we would set up the grids in the front window and do limit it to 25 pieces, and then hang that up for like a month.
Sure.
As a way to give like our customers and our comic fans something to do creatively, but also like then have a thing for people to come look at.
Sure.
It's just that my initial thought of an opening, we can't do an opening.
Nope. That's flaw number one.
Yeah, that's a big flaw.
I'll be honest. Flaw number two is I don't feel comfortable doing anything that keeps people in the store longer than normal.
Okay.
I love it for a business aspect.
Yeah.
I just think for a social health thing, we want people to come in and leave as fast as they can.
Yeah, we had a gallery.
I know.
How often did people look in the gallery?
I know, but this is creating something where we're I think asking for a behavior that is not socially appropriate right now.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of stuff that I'd like to see us do. Like when we reopen, it's literally just doors open. Like until
you have to vacuum.
Social distancing stuff is at an end. That's when we can do like real big, like, hey, we're all back to normal. Everyone can come in, do stuff where it's more about a larger social experience. I don't think it's safe to do that until society as a whole
hypothetically,
says it's okay.
A book's coming out in August. A creator's like, hey, my book's coming out in August. Can we do a signing? We'd have to say no.
I mean, something like that we could, but it would have to. Well, for one thing, we'd have to be like, "Are you okay being in close proximity with a bunch of strangers?"
Yeah,
because that right there is like, I don't know if I love that idea. But we could do something where there's a more spaced out line where people are outside. As long as we know that,
So case by case basis.
The general season.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't want to do it in like December because it's like it could be 13 degrees outside and we can only fit reasonably 10 or 15 people in the store at a time. Like granted 10 or 15 is more than we get for a lot of our signings, so it's not problem kind of solved itself there. But yeah, it's anything that's like an event or a social thing. Like I don't feel comfortable with it until the facts on the ground change, and they haven't. Like
and they won't for a while.
They won't for a while. So
they can't.
Yeah, I mean, like already there's talk of we might not have a football season this year.
Yeah, they Major League Baseball put out their plan, and it's not real great, but it's also, I think, almost too ambitious.
What's that?
Oh, there's a lot of steps.
Oh, okay. Because I mean, there's things you could do for like if Soldier Field was like, let's do, you cap the attendance at like 40% or whatever, so that everybody has a seat between them or whatever. But just gathering
like press conferences now, where there's like a person, three seats, a person.
But that said, one, I don't know if they'd even fill 40% of Soldier Field, depending on what the team looks like this year, based on how they played last year.
Nick Foles now.
Two, I think even then, like getting people there becomes like it's not healthy for that many fans to be moving through the stadium. To have thousands of people, even 40% is thousands of people.
Right.
And just the logistics of moving an entire team from city to city, state to state for 4 months at a time. Like, these are the problems. Like, it's not safe to do those things right now.
Did you read the article where they had the CDC had traced the lineage of the disease in Chicago, and how it was like one person who went to
a funeral. They were
and
asymptomatic,
then a birthday party, and then church,
and there they go.
Yeah,
like
that's all it takes.
And that's, I mean, not to bum people out with a lot of coronavirus talk on a comics industry business podcast on the Yak Channel Podcast Network, but
that's what this is.
But the thing that everyone needs to be very cognizant of once, the stay-at-home orders are lifted and businesses can reopen is that, like, you still have to treat it like those orders are in place. Do not just go out to go out. Like, go out when you need to go out. Go home every other time. Gloves, masks. Be aware of what you're touching. Don't touch your face. Don't get within 6 feet of people. So, like, it's not like when the order's lifted, everything just immediately goes back to what it was like in January. Like, that's not responsible.
It's going to be a long time before it's like it was.
So, yeah, it's...
This may be the death of the handshake.
I'm okay with that. We have to... if we're lucky, we can reopen our doors. That's kind of all I want to do at this point. Like, reopen the doors... maybe new books, and then everything is just like being as safe about it as we possibly can.
Yep.
For the remainder of the time until eventually this situation resolves itself. As long as we don't go out of business like the XFL.
I mean, they just ceased operating. Are they out of business again?
They were
doing well.
They were non-specific as to whether or not this was the actual end of the XFL, but they laid basically everybody off.
Yeah.
So it definitely sounds like, no, probably not coming back next year.
As a lifelong football fan who's not fanatic about it at all, I've been a San Diego Chargers fan since the 80s. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that I'm a Los Angeles Chargers fan.
No.
But I'm now interested in a team that I never gave a care about before.
Yeah.
That'd be the New York Jets.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Did they actually pick up their new quarterback?
It was my understanding that the answer is yes.
I saw his name in association with that name, and I thought, oh, okay, interesting.
1 year, $9 million.
Okay, cool. I hope he does well.
Yeah, me too.
Colin Kaepernick got
I hope
picked up by the New York Jets.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a weird year for quarterbacks in new cities. I mean, people are always moving around in the NFL.
Right.
But, I mean, Tom Brady on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh, it's so weird.
It's so weird.
It's so weird. Yeah.
I was talking to Garrett, our Southern Hobby rep, about Brady on the Bucs, and
how did that even come up? Who brought it up?
We talked for a while. I cannot remember.
You never get to talk to Garrett.
I really, well, I mean, when I do talk to Garrett, we're both working.
Yeah.
And technically we were working at this point because he was calling up while I actually just happened to be at the store doing some other stuff, prepping orders. And he called up to say, hey, we got a bunch of stuff. We're not really shipping out, but we can ship out the Black Widow action figures and the Transformers toys and the Stan Lee action figure. And I said, sure. And then we talked for a while because he was at home and I had no customers. So it was very easy to just be like, let's just chat. And we did. And he's not really much of a sports guy. But we talked a little bit about the Tom Brady situation and just about like how foolish is it for Tom Brady to do this? Incredibly foolish, or maybe he still got it.
Well,
and I'm just like incredibly.
Brett Favre.
I'm just like incredibly foolish. You can bring up like Brett Favre, Peyton Manning had a second act for his career.
Yeah.
But like, man, everything about Tom Brady right now is like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, he got a good contract from a franchise that's happy to have him there because it'll sell tickets.
Sure.
But do you think that team has a chance?
I mean,
do you think
now more than before.
Do you think of any other pieces that's going to make that suddenly like a playoff caliber team? Still the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, dude. Still playing Tampa Bay.
No, sure. But I mean, it's a step.
Yeah. People have pointed out that it's the Tampa Bay situation is so hyper specific.
It's like Bendis going to DC.
Because
you're right.
You can't get people to go to that stadium in Tampa Bay because of where it's situated. It's just in a really kind of terrible place.
Yeah.
Based on how Tampa Bay St. Pete works. So anything to draw people to it is of value to that team, even if they don't win. And I mean, I feel like Brady's the guy who's maybe won enough that he's just like, like, it sounded like a lot of the reports are he really hated Belichick.
Wow.
Like, just was so done with having him as a head coach that he would go nearly anywhere if they could treat him better. And I thought that was, honestly, in retrospect, I'm like, that's kind of sweet. I'm kind of rooting for him now. But it wasn't like he wanted more money or more control or more chances to win.
He didn't want to cheat. They made him.
He's just like, what if I had a job I didn't hate? And it's like, wow, okay, I get that. I kind of get that. Speaking of the Southern Hobby Order, when I got it shipped out, it was, the 8 deluxe Black Widow movie action figures from Marvel Legends.
In the white suit.
White suit. She comes with all the different accessories and the effects pieces. And the Stan Lee Marvel Legends figure comes with a signed shield. And there were robot toys, but it was nothing that I was personally that hyped for. It was either stuff I already had or one thing I didn't, where I'm like, I can wait on that. But it's like, I really want to get those Marvel Legends because I think we can sell a bunch of those, even online. Because, like, they're Marvel Legends. They always sell. The only thing anyone's cared about from that order are the robot toys. Like,
No,
we've sold
not...
one Stan Lee figure.
Right. We have had people on the Instagram page say, I claim this robot, I claim Stan Lee, but it specifically says, email us if you want anything, and no one did. So,
no. And the people who did email us, they just wanted robot toys. So the robot toys have done way better, which I'm like, that's cool, because they cost a little bit more than the Black Widow figure does. And I realized, man, the Hasbro is colossally screwed this year, because they're going to have a ton of Black Widow stuff coming out over the next month.
Yeah.
For a movie that doesn't come out till November. Yeah. Maybe. It's going to be real rough. I'm sure they're already producing Eternal stuff that they can't even release now.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I know for a fact we ordered an Eternals wave.
Yeah, super weird. Like, all those companies that have stuff tied to movie franchises that are now, like, pushed back anywhere from 6 months to a year.
How about all the Funko Pops?
Yeah, Funko. I told you this before. Funko's a company that's completely screwed because all their stuff is so tied to so many different franchises that are either, like, on hiatus or delayed or... Like, just the basic, like, TV stuff and movie stuff that's just like, oh, those shows aren't coming out now. They got pushed back. They can't film them. But then on top of that, like, so much of Funko's business model is going to a store and they just have them there and you buy them because they're only $10. No one's going to stores to buy that stuff now. Yeah. I don't know how many Funkos get sold online, but probably not nearly as many that are point of purchase.
Speaking of things coming back, did you realize that What We Do in the Shadows comes back next week?
No, I didn't. Yeah, that'll be exciting to see in my DVR.
Yeah. A little bit of a little fun for you.
Yay!
Even though it's not comic related, but this entire podcast was not.
No.
Like I was going to say it was, but we talked a lot about sports at the end.
Yeah, and viruses.
We didn't even touch on WrestleMania, but we're out of time. Thanks for listening.
And keep reading comics.
This has been Contest of Challengers. Thanks for listening. Keep reading comics. Challengers is located at 1845 Northwestern Avenue in the Bucktown neighborhood of Chicago. 773-278-0155.
And in the River North neighborhood of Chicago at 750 North Franklin Street, number 103, 312-285-2252.
Keep up to date with new releases and events at challengerscomics.com. Like Challengers Comics on Facebook, follow @Challengers on Twitter, and help fund this podcast at patreon.com/challengers.